Imagine streets frozen in sunlight, a saloon door still hanging, a schoolhouse with lesson books left on the floor, a mining stamp mill rusting in place. The United States is littered with places like this, towns that boomed, then emptied, then sat, abandoned and weird, sometimes for a century. Projects like Geotab and Batch GeoMap, about 3,800 to 4,500 ghost towns. But if you include every lost mining camp, stage stop, or frontier settlement that briefly existed and then disappeared, some historians estimate the number could reach 10,000 to 20,000 across the United States. Now, what do we mean by ghost town? A ghost town isn't just an empty place on the map. Historians define it as a once functioning settlement with homes, businesses, and community life that was later abandoned, sometimes completely, sometimes leaving just a few holdouts. Some towns collapsed when gold or silver ran out. Others were bypassed by new railroads or highways. Some were poisoned by pollution or consumed by government projects like reservoirs. And others just emptied slowly as farming mechanized and people moved to cities. Now let's look at several overlapping structural reasons the United States produced so many ghost towns, and each one is backed by historical policy, geography, and economic change. Number 1. Rapid frontier expansion and resource booms, the rush model. From the mid-1800s onward, U.S. federal policy and global commodity demand produced repeated, localized rushes. Gold in California, 1848 to 50s, silver in Nevada, Comstock, 1859, copper and later oil fields that created towns almost overnight. Laws like the Homestead Act, 1862, accelerated westward settlement by offering parcels of public land, while discoveries of high-value minerals triggered instantaneous population inflows and the rapid construction of full towns, hotels, newspapers, schools. When the ore or oil declined, many of those settlements emptied just as quickly, leaving intact streets and buildings behind. Examples include Bodie, California, a 19th century gold boomtown, and Garnett, Montana, which peaked in the 1890s with saloons and hotels before being abandoned by the 1940s. Number 2. Transportation revolutions that created, then bypassed towns. In the 19th century, railroads literally decided which towns lived or died. A depot could bring merchants and settlers, and a bypass could starve a town's economy. The same pattern repeated in the 20th century with highways. When an interstate bypassed a service town on an older route, traffic fell and businesses closed. The National Park Service and historical studies show how route changes and interstate building hollowed dozens of roadside towns and service communities. Number 3. Single industry or company-dependent economies. Towns built around one employer, a mine, mill, or mill town run by a single company, were extremely vulnerable. When mines closed, mills automated, or commodity prices collapsed, the jobs disappeared, and so did the households. Some collapses were also environmental. The Tri-State Mining District and other Superfund sites were effectively depopulated when contamination and subsidence made communities unsafe. Federal buyouts and cleanups followed. Number 4. Disaster, contamination, and government projects that removed towns intentionally. Not all abandonment was gradual. Long-burning mine fires, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Toxic contamination, major floods, and large infrastructure projects led to forced evacuations or disincorporation. The Quabbin Reservoir project in Massachusetts required the formal disincorporation and removal of 4 towns in the 1930s to supply Boston with water. Centralia's underground coal fire, begun 1962, produced compulsory buyouts and near total abandonment. These are examples where safety or public works priorities produced ghost towns by design or necessity. Number 5. Technological change, mechanization, and sectoral shifts, less labor, more output. Over the 20th century, mechanization in mining, agriculture, and manufacturing reduced the need for large local labor forces. U.S. farm counts and rural populations fell as tractors and industrial agriculture boosted productivity. Manufacturing employment also contracted as automation, productivity gains, and offshoring cut labor needs. When a town's raison d'etre could be accomplished with far fewer workers, people migrated away, and some towns never recovered. Number 6. A large, low-density country where abandoned places persist. The U.S. has vast tracts of land, deserts, plains, and mountains, where abandoned settlements can remain standing for decades without immediate redevelopment pressure. By contrast, denser countries with less empty land are more likely to repurpose or demolish derelict towns. World Bank population density data show the U.S. has a relatively low density compared with many European countries, which helps explain why abandoned towns can survive visibly on the landscape. Number 7. Historical mobility and the American move on culture. Historically, Americans were unusually mobile. Frontier migration and internal flows made it culturally acceptable to move for opportunity. That mobility meant people readily left places that were no longer viable. Scholarly work shows internal migration played a big role in how the U.S. exploited resources and then abandoned places when returns faded. Note, geographic mobility has fallen in recent decades, but the historical pattern left many abandoned settlements. Number 8. Data shows the scale. Thousands of U.S. ghost towns. Multiple mapping projects and datasets have cataloged thousands of U.S. ghost towns. Geotabs map. Batch Geo's compilation show approximately 3,800 to 4,500 markers depending on inclusion rules, illustrating that the phenomenon is widespread across states, especially large, resource-rich ones like Texas and California. That cataloging effort supports the idea that the U.S. is one of the most extensive documented supplies of ghost towns anywhere. Now the classic ghost town story starts with a strike. Gold, silver, copper. People poured in. Streets, saloons, newspapers, hotels, they appeared fast. When ore quality fell or commodity prices crashed, miners left nearly as fast. The 19th century was full of rushes. Word of a discovery spread, and within weeks, people arrived by the thousands. Streets were laid out. Hotels, saloons, schools, and even opera houses appeared. The Homestead Act of 1862 made land easy to claim, accelerating this wave of settlement. But when the ore ran out or prices dropped, the people moved on. By 1879, Bodie, California, for example, had 7,000 to 10,000 people, 2,000 buildings, and a reputation for lawlessness. A local preacher once called it a sea of sin. But after mining declined, Bodie emptied. Fires in the 20th century left it frozen in time. Today, Bodie is preserved in arrested decay as a state historic park. Rhyolite, Nevada, on the other hand, in 1904 during a gold rush, had electricity, an opera house, and even a 3-story bank building. By 1916, the mines failed and the last train left. Today, its concrete ruins still stand in the desert sun, eerie and skeletal. People lived fast and hard. Saloons outnumbered schools. Families squeezed into shacks, while fortunes were made and lost overnight. Children played in dusty streets, while gunfights broke out in the next block. For a few years, towns felt alive. Then, almost as quickly, they became silent. Railroads in the 19th century decided the fate of towns. If a depot came your way, prosperity followed. If a line bypassed you, the town often withered. The same story repeated in the 20th century with highways. Route 66 became America's Main Street, with diners, motels, and neon signs welcoming travelers. But when the interstate system bypassed those routes, traffic and business vanished. Amboy, California, for example, was once a bustling stop along Route 66. Amboy nearly died when I-40 diverted traffic. Its iconic Roy's Motel and Cafe now stands as a relic and photo stop for travelers retracing the old highway. The human impact of this. Imagine running a diner where hundreds of travelers ate daily. Then, one summer, the interstate opens. The next week, you see only 1 or 2 cars. Families lost livelihoods overnight, entire towns emptied, and communities disappeared simply because the road moved. Another American pattern was single-industry company towns. Entire settlements built around one employer, a coal mine, a sawmill, or a smelter. Workers lived in company-owned houses, shopped at company stores, and sent kids to company schools. When that company closed or mechanized, the town died. Towns like Pitcher, Oklahoma, Kennecott, Alaska. For decades, Pitcher was one of America's top lead and zinc producers. But the mining left toxic piles of waste and collapsing ground. By the 2000s, it was unsafe to live there. The government bought residents out. And in 2009, Pitcher was disincorporated. Today, it's a toxic wasteland. While in Kennecott, Alaska, a massive copper camp was founded in 1903. It housed 300 people with a hospital, school, and recreation hall. When the ore ran out in 1938, everyone left in a matter of weeks. Today, Kennecott is preserved as part of Wrangell St. Elias National Park. Families in these towns worked and lived entirely under company control. Pay often came in scrip, tokens only usable at the company store. When the jobs disappeared, families had little choice but to pack up everything they owned and move. Although some ghost towns weren't abandoned voluntarily, like Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1962, a coal seam fire ignited under the town. As the fire spread underground, roads buckled, toxic gases seeped into basements, and sinkholes opened. By the 1980s, most residents were forced out. Today, only a handful of people remain, while the fire still burns below. Another ghost town is Quabbin Reservoir, Massachusetts. In the 1930s, four towns, Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott, were dissolved and flooded to create Boston's water supply. Families had to leave their homes behind, knowing they'd soon be underwater. There was also technological change and decline. The 20th century brought new forces, mechanization and automation. Farming towns shrank as tractors replaced farmhands. Factories automated, cutting labor needs. In cities like Detroit, deindustrialization left entire neighborhoods empty. An example is Thurmond, West Virginia. Once a thriving coal town with banks, hotels, and a busy rail depot, it declined with coal's collapse. Today, only a handful of residents remain, and most of its buildings are preserved by the National Park Service, making it a near ghost town frozen in time. The U.S. is a low-density country, around 36 to 38 people per square kilometer. And the federal government owns about 30% of U.S. land, mostly in the West. That means when a town is abandoned, there's little redevelopment pressure. In Europe, abandoned villages are often repurposed. In America's deserts and mountains, ghost towns can sit untouched for decades, preserved by dry air and isolation. From wagon trains heading west to Dust Bowl families fleeing drought, U.S. culture normalized moving on. Historian Frederick Jackson Turner called this the frontier spirit, an openness to abandon the old and seek new opportunity. That willingness made ghost towns possible. People didn't always stay to rebuild, they simply left. So how many ghost towns are there? No global census exists, but projects like Geotab and Batch Geomap 3,800 to 4,500 U.S. ghost towns. They're densest in California, Nevada, and Texas, but examples exist in nearly every state. Other countries have ghost towns too. Spain's España Vacía, the empty Spain, has hundreds of abandoned villages. Italy's hills are dotted with deserted medieval hamlets. Japan faces an IKEA problem. Millions of abandoned rural houses. But the U.S. is different. Here, ghost towns often appear suddenly, the result of booms and busts, transport shifts, or disasters. And unlike Europe or Asia, America's wide open spaces preserve these ruins for decades. Ghost towns aren't just spooky relics. They're stories in wood and stone, of dreams chased, fortunes lost, disasters endured, and families forced to start over. The U.S. has so many because of combined resource rushes, fragile economies, vast federal lands, and a culture of mobility. Together, these forces left behind thousands of abandoned towns, frozen reminders that prosperity can be fleeting. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Until next time, bye.